Well, hello, LinkedIn, and welcome to Frasco Unplugged. My name is Barbara Rudd. I am a former private investigator and current talent acquisition specialist here at Frasco. Today, I want to talk to you about what Frasco Unplugged is. Frasco Unplugged aims to bring you conversations that will be with industry experts in private investigations. And just so you know, this is our very first episode for 2025, and we are thrilled to launch this initiative to provide our LinkedIn community with valuable insights in an easily digestible format. Today, we will be exploring the field of open source intelligence, also known as OSINT. And I will say, one of my favorite areas. This area of expertise has become a cornerstone in modern investigations. So, to help us guide us through this topic, we have two highly respected experts who will share their insights and experiences. So, let's get to know our speakers. Ritu, Gill, thank you so much for joining us today. Would you mind sharing a little bit of information about your background?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Barbara, for having me on today. My name's Ritu Gill. As you mentioned, I have over 17 years of experience working in law enforcement and government. I am considered a subject matter expert, although, every day I'm learning something new. Um, uh, I've been doing this for a while, but each day is different, and I think really there is a lot to gain from other speakers and in venues like this. But yeah, back to my experience. I'm an OSINT enthusiast. Excited to be here. I love networking. You'll see a lot of my content online. If somebody Googles me, you'll probably see some of the blog posts I've written, and just to share the knowledge out, because OSINT for good is really important to me.
Absolutely. I love you saying that. OSINT for good. Rob, so same question is going to be for you. Would you share a little background about yourself?
Of course. Great stuff already here with the OSINT for Good. Can't agree more. I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. My name is Rob Kinsch, obviously. I have 12 years investigative experience, mostly with insurance claims. That 12 years combined with either conducting or managing surveillance and social media and internet investigations. Um, Coming out of college, I did surveillance as an investigator for a few years. And then I joined Frasco in 2016, coming up on 9 years next month, where I learned social media investigations and was introduced to OSINT and just fell in love with it, the investigative mindset. Currently, I lead a team of desktop investigators, approximately a dozen remote, for our social media and internet investigations.
Very nice. And I love working with you, Rob, by the way. It's such a pleasure. So let's get into our questions. Let's understand some OSINT. So, Ritu, my first question is for you. Can you explain what open source intelligence is? And also, why is it so important for modern investigators?
Yeah, of course. So open source, OSINT stands for open source intelligence. Um, Essentially, it's using publicly available information to answer a specific question, usually an intelligence question, we like to call it. So we're using things like open sources. What are those? Things like social media, things like news media, website information, blog information. That's all considered open source and in that domain, in that public domain. So it's essentially, again, going back to some of the basics of what is open source. It is information that anybody in the general public can access. That's why it's open source. And really, how we can apply that in our current research and investigations is in so many ways. And really, the wealth of information that we can get from that public domain is huge. And of course, it does matter where someone's doing this kind of work, in terms of like what country, because of privacy laws that can be an indicator and can change what we're seeing online in those realms. But I definitely think that just as there's many tools in your investigative toolbox, OSINT, open source intelligence, is another tool for you to utilize. And I think it's definitely one of the important tools that everyone should have in their toolbox.
Great answer. And yes, I agree. completely agree. So, Rob, I want to ask a question about practical applications of utilizing open source intelligence in investigations. But I also would like to ask that could you provide a little bit of an example for our audience today?
Of course, of course. Um, Going off of what was just said here, too, of its OSINT's a great tool in the toolbox of investigative mindset doing investigations. So when it comes time to social media and internet investigations, what OSINT really helps is the efficiency, how to narrow down information, get what you need quicker. If you just Google something, some words, you're going to get a million pages, of course. But OSINT tools like Google operators using in Google could really help narrow down your results. An example I like to show when we're training new hires is a joint email I have with my wife. And if you use the quotes Google operator, so I was looking for websites with that exact email address in it, you'll find an old newsletter from a church. Search that PDF with that email address, you'll see a mention of my wife to contact her at that email address. And later on, you'll see a mention of me as I was telling them that we were hiring at Frasco years ago, back in 2018 approximately. So with me doing insurance investigations often, and we work closely with our surveillance team, obviously, we were conducting surveillance and social media, me or my wife. Hopefully the social media investigator would identify that. Now they have a lead where to conduct surveillance. They have a lead of who our relationship is with who, and going on and branching off of that. Keyword searching in various platforms. In username searching, a lot of people use the same handle or username off their email addresses or various social medias. So there's various tools to look into that. OSINT with maps is handy in investigations. There's tons of tools, and we could talk forever about that. But different ways for surveillance to get a layout, maybe. Should we conduct manned surveillance or unmanned surveillance? And reverse image searching comes in handy as well if you have a photo of somebody. With background investigations we conduct too. There's many websites out there that you could search for information, whether free or paid. I have bookmarked at work a website that has the Secretary of State type agencies for all 50 states. So if I'm helping out with the background investigation, I got quick access to those. And with the backgrounds, Google operators could help you identify some criminal records or business records or mug shots from somebody throughout various states. So you can be not just focused on where somebody lives. So OSINT is a very big tool on desktop investigations.
Great answer. Thank you for the explanation too, Rob. Thanks so much. So Ritu, I'm back to you. What are some challenges or limitations of using open source intelligence in investigations?
That's a great question because, there's so much information. So one of the things I think of is, okay, there's lots of positive and there's lots of advantages of using open source information. But those challenges are there as well. And some of those, or one of them I can think of, is just the sheer volume of data online that's available online for us to use. But sometimes it's overwhelming. But as Rob mentioned, sometimes filtering for content, because so there are ways that you can get through some of the challenges by filtering out content. However, it still can be difficult because there's a lot of information out there, and depending on who your target is or your subject of interest, you might end up with a lot of information, and you need to, narrow the focus. Another challenge that I can think of in OSINT is just accuracy and reliability of the content. So is it accurate? Is it outdated? Is it incomplete? Sometimes there's disinformation in terms of misleading content, deliberate misleading of something out there. So these are other things that we have to think about when we're considering open source intelligence. Another part of it is, I had mentioned OSINT for good, but there's also, legal and ethical issues around collecting open source information. Again, depending on who you work for, who you are, and all that matters as well. And this is why, for me, I really push OSINT for good, because there are going to be legal, ethical things that come up in OSINT. But it's just being aware of what you're able to do, and what are the parameters around how you can use open source intelligence. At the end of the day, with even challenges listed, OSINT is incredibly powerful, and a great component to have part of that investigative strategy that you have, or part of your toolbox, as I mentioned before.
Great answer, Ritu. Thank you so much. And I want to build off that with what Ritu just spoke about with the challenges and limitations, Rob. So my question to you is, how can investigators overcome these challenges and also maximizing the effectiveness of open source intelligence?
Great question. The first thing that comes to mind is having clear objectives of what the investigation is about. Every investigation should be answering the 5 W's and the H. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. With our insurance investigations, what I think of often with OSINT, because that's what I'm familiar with, we need to know date of loss, injury, or what the claim is about. Is it some type of physical injury or stress injury? Knowing both of those could help us identify both any red flags, or just as important, anything going along to help support that claim, so we can help the insurance companies, our clients, whoever, make informed decisions with unbiased information. Ritu talked about here of verifying the accuracy of information. It's very often people have the same name as somebody else in their family. They're a junior or a senior. So you don't want to be utilizing OSINT and find what you think are some criminal records, or maybe a bankruptcy, something along those lines. And it's really just somebody else, either a relative or just somebody else with that name that might live in that area. A lot of people share names, and there's a lot of people in the country and in the world, obviously. Adapting and redefining your techniques and your standard operating procedures is very important too. As a challenge, as OSINT changes and the world's changing and social media and the internet's always changing. It was in 2018, I believe. Up until then, you could just plug in somebody's cell phone number in Facebook, and if they had a profile with it, it popped up. And then when they stopped that, now you had to have different techniques. So be using some OSINT information on that. I don't want to give too many trade secrets away with our investigations, but when you're doing some keyword searching, if you know a subject's a birthday, or if they have something to connect them to, if it's a workers' compensation claim, looking for their workplace, they're insured, something along those lines. If you know a hobby or interest of theirs, trying to find some connection to that to help rule it in or out comes in very handy. And one more thing with overcoming these challenges, what's important for any good investigator or company, of course, is setting aside some time to do some research and development, staying on top of the game.
Absolutely, Rob. That is great information. And you mentioned how if names are common, there could be issues. And I just want to say, I don't think I have a common name. My name is Barbara Rudd. However, I found out there's 6 individuals in my state alone, and I can't tell you how many spam calls or just calls in general looking for somebody else that wasn't myself.
I know at least one other Rob Kinsch in California, and that's not me. Yeah.
That goes for my name as well, Ritu Gill, because a lot of people think it's not very common. It's actually quite common. I always say, why don't you just plug it into Facebook or Instagram and see how many come up? Because again, depending in different parts of the world, then they might be quite common.
It's just fascinating, all of it. So, thank you again for all this information. And Rob, I kind of want to go back to something that Ritu touched on for my question for you. How can an investigator ensure that their approach to open source intelligence is ethical, respecting the privacy and legal boundaries, but also being effective at gathering and analyzing information?
Very good question. It's important to be staying informed on laws here in the United States. You have state laws, you have federal laws. So staying informed with that, staying informed to work with the company, with your superiors, of course. A general rule of thumb is gathering public content. So such as with social media, of not friend requesting somebody with your sock account to get information if they're only sharing with their friends. But you might find somebody, let's say Facebook, still a very popular social media platform, to find somebody posting in a public group. You can learn their hobbies, their interests, and you can see what is in there because it's a public group. It's showing up right there on Facebook. But if they're in a private group, you can't be going in there. My argument is they can't be doing that. They have an expectation of privacy. It's not worth it. Now, then there's the different viewpoints on, and when social media is always changing the way it shows content and whatnot, but maybe you could see what the name of the private group is and you have another lead for your investigation, of course. With insurance claims, and I mentioned this with the last question, is going in unbiased. We don't want to be looking for somebody doing something. We want to be going in to do an investigation with a clear objective and goals. What are we investigating? Whether for us, think of insurance claims, but there's also so many types of investigations you can do, of course, domestic and more. Want to make sure you have a valid reason to do investigation comes important with that, what I think of. Nobody wanting to help somebody do harassment or discrimination, of course. That's the last thing for myself that I would want to help somebody do, right? And being aware of our own biases, right? Trying to be aware of our own biases, and also of fake content out there. Ritu talked about that earlier, especially as AI is advancing the past few years. There could be some fake content out there. Funny story on that I like here when I think about, is this real or fake? A few years ago, we're doing investigation, and our subject turned out to be a bodybuilder, and we're seeing all these photos of them in poses. I don't remember what we were investigating for specifically, but it looked fake to us. And we were talking around, a few of us investigators, going, hey, their body is tanned from like the neck down, but their face is white. What is up? It looks fake. And through some research, found out that that was norm in that culture. They didn't tan their face. I don't know if it was that area or just bodybuilding in general. So we were aware of that just looks off, and then doing a little more research onto that. So really being aware of the surroundings as investigations are, and aware of yourself, of thinking right and wrong, and the golden rule is what I generally think of.
You're absolutely right with looking at the photographs, really analyzing it, because we need to verify the information, which is a very important point of open source intelligence. It's not just gathering the information, we're analyzing it and we're verifying it. So thank you for that answer. I really appreciate it. Ritu, I want to touch on something that actually Rob mentioned in his answer, but what role do you foresee open source intelligence playing in the future of private investigations? And I have a second part. How do you think advancements in technology is going to shape its use and effectiveness?
Yeah, great questions. The way I look at it is that open source, it can't be ignored. It's not going away, and that information that's out there is out there for us to collect, for a specific purpose and for good and all that kind of stuff. It's something that private investigators need to look at. Obviously for some PIs out there may be the physical side, but the online side is huge. And in this age of oversharing and all that information is really important. What can help us? When I look at the future, what does that look like? One of the things I think of is, the future of AI, how that's going to play into some of the tools or the techniques we're using, or how they can help us improve. Obviously, it's evolving, and I think it does look promising. And, I think a lot of OSINT people are keeping an eye on some of the new tools that are coming out. There's geolocation tools and AI embedded together, which could be amazing for investigators and for people that need to locate a certain person. Maybe they just need to identify the background and say, hey, I know that's in that country or that city. That's all really important. There's a lot of different ways that AI could be used in research and investigations. I think it'll take some time to see really how that evolves. I know right now we're in kind of that phase of there's a new tool popping up AI related all the time. It's hard to keep up with, but at the same time, it's like if you do your research, you read what other people do, there's people that will actually even, dig into that tool to tell you a little bit more about it. So it's all about learning, but I think as we evolve, AI will really have an impact on OSINT practitioners. But also, I see it in a positive light because there's things that we can use it for, and I think it really positive value that it can bring to your research and to your investigations in a few different facets.
Well, thank you, Rita, for that. So we have a question that came up in our comments, so I would like to kind of help explain. So we have a question on what free and paid courses would we recommend for this individual to take when they're on a budget. So I'm going to give this to Ritu.
Yeah, of course. So lots of options when you think of that. Like, I would say honestly, before courses, I would want to ask that person, have they been to OSINT conferences? Have they dug in that way where they can learn from other OSINT practitioners, right? When I think of OSINT conference, I think of Osmosis Con, which a lot of people are familiar with. That said, for budget OSINT courses, I mean, there's lots of different avenues. Specifically, I know on the expensive side, there's going to be some that people will not be able to budget for. I do know that there's some based in Canada. There's the OSINT Center in Canada, but there's cyber training in Canada, but there's also US based. I know Micah Hoffman, he has courses online, and that might be, I think it's called My OSINT Training, I believe the website is. So again, you do have options, and I think those ones may be a little bit more cost effective, and hopefully you're able to get something out of those ones that I've shared.
I also have looked at my OSINT with trying sometimes when I'm doing interviews with individuals and they don't really have a lot of information on open source. That is one of the leads I provide them. But one easy one is, just within YouTube, you can ask YouTube for free courses on open source intelligence. It's probably one of the quickest ways that you're going to get into it. But you're going to want to kind of refine that because open source intelligence can go in so many different areas, one of which might be hacking. I know for our firm, we don't handle hacking, not even ethical hacking. There's going to be information on the dark web, using the onion router. Again, Frasco, we don't use that. But if that's something that is of interest with you, really get yourself to understand what it means. But again, there are free courses out there. And I'm going to reference back to Ritu. Ritu has some courses on her website. I highly recommend that you check her out. We have information below for her website. And she also has a free newsletter. So again, I'm going to encourage that you get the newsletter. I get it every week, and it does have some great, useful information.
Thanks, Barbara. I appreciate that. I want to mention one other thing with all that, like lots of good information. Another thing I think of and I see popping up every now and then is it'll be a conference like OSINT related, and then they'll also have a day of OSINT training embedded in that conference. So you're almost getting a 2-for-1. I know a Layer 8 conference. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's a OSINT/social engineering conference, so a little different. But also I know there's going to be like a day of OSINT training. So for some people, they might want to go that avenue. Lots of options, as you can tell. We could offer 5-6 different options. You really have to see what fits best. But if anybody has questions, you can always reach out directly to me and I can try to help you out where I can.
I'm going to ask a little bit of a question and then we're going to be getting into the end. What books would you recommend somebody to read? Rob, why don't you provide your top two? Okay, you have them
This is not
there.
a paid advertisement, but Michael Bazel's books, amazing. This is the 10th edition. They just came out with an 11th earlier this year, I believe. But that is just such a handy in his website. He's somebody like Ritu here, where I look at on LinkedIn and follow online and get some newsletters and full of valuable information. So yeah, Michael Bazel's OSINT techniques.
Yeah, he's great. Even in person, great information, but his book is absolutely amazing. It really is helpful. Ritu, what is your favorite?
One of my favorites. Well, I have a few. I don't. So you already mentioned Michael Bazel, so I'll talk about Ray Baker. She wrote an OSINT book a couple of years ago, awesome, called Deep Dive, and it's available on Amazon, just like Intel Techniques. Excellent book. Again, I like it when there's like recent content, because OSINT does start changing quite a bit, but like when something's been written in a short kind of span, I'm like, okay, I definitely want to read it. But I would recommend people look into that one, Ray Baker, Deep Dive. And I know she's writing another book, and I don't know if it's coming out later this year, but it's going to be about AI and OSINT. So it's going to be quite interesting, and I'm pumped to read that one.
Same here. Thank you. So we're ending our time. So I would like just to say thank you. I want to give my gratitude to our esteemed speakers, Ritu, Gill, and Rob Kinsch, for their invaluable information. And also to you, our LinkedIn community. Thank you so much for attending our inaugural Frasco Unplugged session. So we hope we provided information that is helpful, and then that if you do have more questions, that you will feel free to contact us. You can reach out to Frasco, you can reach out to Ritu, Gill. Just know that we are committed to providing our community with ongoing opportunities to learn and connect with industry experts. So one last thing, please stay tuned for our next episode, where we will continue to explore new and exciting topics on the realm of private investigation. So until then, take care, thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful day.